My name is Nora Callahan. I am 29 years old, and 14 months ago a police officer knocked on my door and told me my husband had not survived the crash. I remember exactly what I was doing when it happened. I was standing in the kitchen, still in my pajamas, reheating leftover coffee from the morning. The knock came just after 7 in the evening. I thought it was our neighbor returning the casserole dish I had lent her 2 weeks before. I wasn't worried. I had no reason to be. Then I opened the door. 2 officers stood there, a man and a woman, both in uniform. The woman was holding her hat in her hands, turning it slowly, like she didn't know what to do with her fingers. That small detail, her turning that hat, is the thing I remember most. Even now, they told me my husband, Owen, had been involved in a multi-vehicle accident on Route 17 during a heavy rainstorm. A truck had crossed the center line. 3 cars were hit. Owen's car had been pushed off the road and down an embankment. By the time emergency crews reached the bottom, there was nothing they could do. I remember nodding. I remember saying thank you. I don't know why I said thank you. I closed the door and sat down on the floor right there in the hallway and didn't move for a very long time. Owen had been driving back from his mother's house 2 towns over. He called me from the road around 4 that afternoon. I had let it go to voicemail because I was in the middle of folding laundry and I figured I'd call him back in 10 minutes. I never called him back. That voicemail is still on my phone. I've never deleted it. I've also never listened to it again. Before I tell you what happened next, please like and subscribe and leave me a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. It really means a lot to know who's listening. Now, let me tell you the rest. The weeks after Owen died are not something I can describe cleanly. Grief doesn't work the way people tell you it will. Nobody tells you that the hardest moments aren't the big ones. The funeral, the first holidays, the first birthday. The hardest moments are the small ones. The first time you instinctively buy 2 of something at the grocery store. The first time you hear a song he liked playing from a car window somewhere and you freeze on the sidewalk and can't remember how to walk. Owen and I had been together since we were 22. We met at a mutual friend's going-away party, and we spent the whole night standing near the food table talking about absolutely nothing. He was funny in a quiet way. Not the kind of funny that performs for a room, but the kind that catches you off guard when you're not expecting it. By the time the party ended, we had exchanged numbers, and 2 days later he texted me and asked if I wanted to go somewhere that had significantly better snacks. We were married 4 years later in a small ceremony in his aunt's backyard. Nothing fancy. 30 people, paper lanterns, his uncle burning the chicken. It was the best day of my life. Losing him at 28 felt impossible, not just emotionally, it felt logically impossible, like something had malfunctioned in the order of things. We had plans. We were saving up to buy a house. We had talked about a dog. We had talked about everything. After the accident, I moved through each day the way you move through water. Everything was slower, heavier, harder to hold on to. I went back to work after 3 weeks because staying home felt unbearable in a different way. My coworkers didn't know what to say to me, which I understood. I didn't know what to say to myself either. My younger brother, Tommy, checked on me constantly. He lived 40 minutes away, but he came over almost every weekend, and sometimes on weekday evenings just to sit with me. He never pushed me to talk. He would sometimes just show up with takeout and we would sit on the couch and watch whatever was on television and not say much. I didn't know how much that meant until later. About 5 months after the accident, the calls and visits from friends started to taper off. That's normal, I know. Life moves on for everyone else. The world doesn't pause. But for me, the loss had not gotten smaller. It had just gotten quieter. I kept Owen's side of the closet exactly the way he left it. His toothbrush was still in the bathroom. I knew it was strange. I left them there anyway. Some nights I drove to places we used to go together just to feel close to him somehow. The diner where we used to get breakfast on Sunday mornings. The small lake on the edge of town where we walked sometimes when neither of us could sleep. I never got out of the car. I just sat in the parking lot for a while and then drove home. I had started to accept, slowly and painfully, that this was going to be my life now. A life of slowly learning to carry something that never got lighter. And then, about 8 months after the accident, My brother called me. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was at my desk at work, halfway through a cup of cold coffee. When I saw his name on my phone, I picked up right away. Tommy and I talked often enough that a midweek call wasn't unusual. But the moment I heard his voice, I knew something was different. He sounded strange, not scared exactly, more like stunned. Like someone who had just seen something they couldn't explain and hadn't yet decided what to do with it. "Nora," he said. He paused. "I need you to come over tonight." I asked him what was going on. He said he'd explain when I got there. I asked if everything was okay. Another pause. "I don't know," he said. "Just come, okay? Please come." I left work early. The drive to Tommy's apartment usually takes about 40 minutes. That evening it felt like twice that, even though I know I was driving too fast. My mind was cycling through everything it could think of. Was he sick? Was it our parents? Had something happened to someone? Tommy wasn't dramatic. He didn't call people over for nothing. Whatever this was, it was real. He was waiting outside when I pulled up, which he had never done before. He came to my car before I had even turned off the engine. His face was pale in a way that I didn't recognize on him. He looked like he had been staring at something for a long time and hadn't blinked enough. "Come inside," he said. "I have to show you something." We went into his apartment. He didn't offer me anything to drink, which he always did. He just went straight to his laptop on the kitchen table and pulled up something on the screen. His hands were unsteady in a way I had never seen before. "I was just scrolling," he said. "A friend of mine shared this. I almost kept going, but something made me stop." He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a Facebook post from a small community page. A photo of a man sitting outside what looked like a rural clinic or medical station, somewhere surrounded by open fields and low hills. The man in the photo was thin. His arm was in a sling. He had a beard that Owen didn't have before the accident. But his face. My hand came up to my mouth before I even realized I had moved. The shape of his jaw. The way his ears sat slightly low on his head. The small bump on the bridge of his nose from when he broke it playing basketball in college. The particular way he held his shoulders, slightly rounded forward like he always did when he was tired or in pain. "Tommy," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "I know," he said quietly. That can't." "I know," he said again. I leaned closer to the screen. The post was from a volunteer medical organization operating in a rural region of Montana near the Idaho border. They had taken in a man with no identification who had been found by a ranching family several miles from a highway. He had been severely injured and had been brought in barely conscious. The post said he had been with them for several months and that his condition had stabilized, but that they had not yet been able to identify him or locate any family. The post had been shared many times. Tommy's friend had shared it with a simple caption, "Does anyone know this man?" I read every word twice. My hands were shaking by the time I looked up. "Owen was in an accident in the rain," I said slowly. "His car went off an embankment, they said. They said there was nothing left to." I stopped. I couldn't finish that sentence. Tommy nodded. "The accident was near Route 17. That's not far from the state line." I looked at the photo again. The man's eyes were looking slightly to the side, not at the camera. But even at that angle, even with the beard, even thinner and clearly unwell, I had looked into those eyes almost every day for 7 years. "I need to contact them," I said. Tommy was already nodding. "I already sent a message through the page. I sent it about an hour ago." No reply yet. We sat at that kitchen table for the next 2 hours, refreshing the page and watching the cursor blink. Tommy made tea that neither of us drank. At some point, his girlfriend came home, took one look at us, and quietly sat down without asking questions. I have always appreciated that about her. At around 10 that night, a notification came through. Tommy clicked on it first and then turned the screen toward me without saying anything. The message was from the organization's administrator. It said, "Thank you for reaching out. The gentleman in our care was found by a local family on their property approximately 7 months ago, badly injured and unresponsive. He was transported to our facility and has received ongoing medical care. He has recovered significantly but has not been able to provide information about himself or his family. If you believe you may know him, we would ask that you call us at your earliest convenience." A phone number followed. I called it immediately, even though it was late. It rang 3 times, and then a woman answered, calm and kind, like she had been expecting the call. I told her who I was. I told her about Owen, about the accident, about the date. I told her about the police officers on my doorstep and the voicemail I never listened to and the 8 months I had spent trying to learn how to live without him. She was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said gently, "Mrs. Preddy, Callahan, I think you should come." I flew out the next morning. Tommy came with me. He didn't ask if I wanted him there. He just packed a bag and drove us to the airport. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that. The flight was a little over 3 hours, then a rental car, then an hour and a half driving through open land with mountains growing slowly larger ahead of us. It was beautiful country. I barely saw it. The facility was a converted ranch property, a main house and a few outbuildings, neat and well kept. A woman named Dr. Da Hess met us in the driveway. She was warm and direct, the kind of person who gives you information calmly because she knows that calm is what you need most. She explained as we walked that the man they were caring for had no memory of his life before he was found. No name, no recollection of family or home or any event from his past. She said the brain could do this after severe trauma, essentially protecting itself by closing off access to certain things. She said it could be temporary, but she was careful not to promise anything. She also said that he had been shown several photographs over the months and had not recognized anyone. Then she said, "He's outside in the garden. He usually spends some time out there in the afternoons." We went through the back of the building. There was a wooden door and then a small porch, and then a gravel path leading to a garden with a few chairs and raised planters and a bird bath. An older man was seated near the planters. A younger man was seated a few feet away, turned slightly toward the mountains. I saw his profile. Everything in me stopped. He was thinner. His hair was longer. The beard was darker than the photo. There was a faint scar near his left temple that hadn't been there before. But the way he was sitting, shoulders slightly forward, one hand resting open on his knee, was so completely him, so entirely the way he always sat when he was thinking about something, that my throat closed and I couldn't make a sound. Tommy put his hand on my shoulder. "Dr. Talamy." Hess walked ahead of us and said something to him quietly. He turned his head. His eyes found me. He looked at me the way you look at a stranger. Curious, neutral, politely attentive. Nothing more. I walked toward him anyway. "Hi," I said. My voice was barely working. He nodded. "Hi." He looked at me for a moment. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" There it was. 8 months of grief, a cross-country flight, every mile of hope I had let myself feel. And he looked at me like I was someone he might have passed in a parking lot once. I sat down across from him. I didn't leave. Dr. Hess told me later that his response to me had been different from his response to anyone else who had visited. He hadn't looked away as quickly. He had kept watching my face even after I sat down, in a way that she said wasn't typical for him. She called it a trace response. She said the brain sometimes registers something before the conscious mind can catch up. I came back every day for 2 weeks. I talked to him. I told him about our life. Not in a desperate way, not like I was trying to force something open, but the way you'd tell stories to a friend on a long drive. I told him about the going away party where we met and the text about better snacks. I told him about our wedding and his uncle burning the chicken and how we had laughed so hard during the toast that my mother gave us a look across the yard. I showed him photos on my phone, slowly, one at a time, watching his face for anything. He listened carefully every time. He was always kind, always patient. But his eyes stayed gentle and distant, the way they do when you're listening to something that doesn't belong to you yet. Some evenings I drove back to the small motel where Tommy and I were staying, and I sat on the edge of the bed and just breathed. Tommy would knock on the door and bring food, and we would sit there not saying much. Some nights I cried. Some nights I was too tired to cry. Tommy asked me once, quietly, what I was going to do if it didn't work. If the memory didn't come back. I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, I don't know, but I'm not leaving yet. He nodded, he didn't push. 3 weeks in, I decided to try something different. There was a lake about 20 minutes from the facility. I had seen it from the road on one of the drives back to the motel. It reminded me of the lake back home, the one I used to drive to and sit in the parking lot, the one Owen and I used to walk around when neither of us could sleep. I asked Dr. Hess if it would be possible to take him somewhere for the afternoon. She thought about it, discussed it with her team, and agreed on the condition that a staff member came with us. A quiet young man named Marcus came along and stayed a respectful distance away the whole time. We drove to the lake. We walked along the edge of it without talking much. At one point, I stopped and looked out at the water, and without really planning to, I started to talk about a specific evening from years ago. It was nothing. Just an ordinary night when Owen and I had gone to that lake at home because I had been sad about something I couldn't even name. We hadn't talked the whole time. We had just walked and eventually sat on a flat rock near the water and listened to the frogs. I don't even remember what I was sad about, I said. But I remember that night so clearly. Because when we sat down on that rock, he took my hand. And that was it. That's all he did. And somehow that was exactly enough. I wasn't crying. I was just talking, looking at the water. Beside me, there was a long silence. Then Owen said, there was a frog that wouldn't stop. Everything in the world went quiet. I turned slowly. He was staring at the lake, very still. His brow was slightly furrowed, like he was trying to look at something through fog. There was a frog, he said again, slower. It was louder than the others. You said it was probably the main character. He paused. You always said things like that. My eyes filled so fast I almost couldn't see. Owen, I said. He turned toward me. His face had changed. It was not the face of a man looking at a stranger. It was something older than that, something underneath. Something trying to surface through 8 months of lost time. Nora, he said. His voice broke on the word. Mine broke too. I don't know who moved first. I think we both did. And then we were holding on to each other in the kind of way that doesn't need to be described. The kind of hold that happens when you have spent months reaching for someone who wasn't there, and then suddenly they are there. They are real. They are alive. Marcus was kind enough to look at the lake for a while. The recovery after that was not instant. Memory doesn't work like a switch. Over the following weeks, things came back in pieces. Some things clearly, some things still blurred, some things that may never fully return. The doctors were honest with us about that. Owen has good days and harder days. There are still moments when something slips, when he reaches for a memory and finds it faded. We're learning to be patient with that. What I know is this. 14 months ago, an officer stood at my door turning her hat in her hands, and I sat down on the floor of my hallway and believed my life had ended. And then, 8 months later, a photo appeared on a community Facebook page that my brother almost scrolled past, and everything changed. I don't know what to call what happened. I don't have a clean word for it. I just know that I almost let myself stop hoping. And I'm glad, more than I can say, that I didn't. Owen is home now. The closet is exactly as he left it, which is funny because I never changed it. His toothbrush is still in the bathroom, which is less strange now. Some mornings he gets up before me and I hear him moving around in the kitchen, and I just lie there and listen to the most ordinary sounds in the world and think about how close I came to never hearing them again. We haven't gotten the dog yet, but we're talking about it. I've thought a lot about the version of myself that almost gave up. Not dramatically, not in a single moment, but slowly. The way a fire goes out when nobody tends it. After 8 months of silence in that house, of Owen's jacket still hanging by the door, and a voicemail I couldn't bring myself to delete, I was starting to let the hope burn down to almost nothing. Not because I wanted to. Because I was tired. Because grief, when it goes on long enough, starts to feel like the truth about your life rather than something that happened to it. What I know now is that the worst thing I almost did was stop paying attention. Tommy almost scrolled past that photo. He told me that later, that his thumb was already moving before something made him stop. I think about that a lot. one half second in a different direction and the whole story ends differently. But Tommy is the kind of person who notices things, who shows up on a Wednesday evening with takeout and sits with you without needing to fill the silence. That's not an accident. That's a person who has spent years choosing to be present for the people he loves, and that practice, that quiet, unglamorous habit of showing up, is what made him stop scrolling. Character isn't something you build in a crisis. It's something you've already been building, and the crisis just shows you what's there. And what Owen's recovery taught me about the human mind, I could not have learned any other way. His memory didn't come back because I pushed hard enough or cried in front of him. It came back at a lake, on an ordinary afternoon, when I stopped trying to force something open and just talked. Told the truth about a small, real moment. A frog that wouldn't stop. A rock near the water. His hand finding mine. The brain, even when it has lost access to its own history, still carries something underneath the loss. The doctors called it a trace response. I call it the thing that love leaves behind when everything else gets taken. What I've come to believe, not from anything I was told, but from living through it, is that how you treat the ordinary days determines what you have left when the extraordinary ones arrive. Owen and I built something real across 7 years of regular Tuesday evenings and long drives and bad jokes. That's what was still there when the memory wasn't. Not the big moments. The accumulated weight of small, honest ones. And I think about Nora from 8 months in, sitting in parking lots in the dark, not quite able to leave and not quite able to go forward. I want to tell her that the not leaving matters, that staying in the uncertainty, as painful as it is itself a form of courage. Not the loud kind, the kind that just doesn't quit. The kind that books a flight on a Tuesday morning because the alternative is living the rest of your life wondering, I didn't know it would work out. I want to be honest about that. I drove to that lake with Owen not knowing if anything would come back. I was prepared in some quiet part of myself to love him anyway, whoever he was becoming, whatever he could and couldn't reach. That willingness, I think, is what makes a person someone worth finding their way back to. We're getting the dog this spring. Owen already has a name picked out. I told him it's a terrible name. He said that's exactly why we're using it. Some things don't change, and I've never been more grateful for anything in my life.